The start of history's most deadly war all started with the invasion of Poland in 1939. German forces led by Adolf Hitler invaded the country, and with the overwhelming help of the Soviet Union, Poland was defeated. Within the occupied country, resistance groups began to form. One of them, the Polish Secret Army, had just lost two crucial members, Władysław Dery and Władysław Siermacki. Sent to a small town called Auschwitz, they had been imprisoned in a German concentration camp. Witold Pilecki, the co-founder of the organization, panicked. He then made a decision that would change the lives of many prisoners. He had volunteered to infiltrate the camp.
It's very easy to perceive people who did heroic acts like as if they were not humans, yeah? But when we look at the whole process of decision making, why Pilecki volunteered, it was really hard for him because he had a wife at that time, he had a very small child, and finally he made his decision because he thought that it's his obligation as an officer and as a human being to investigate that and to make something about it.
Born on May 13, 1901, Pilecki had witnessed Poland's independence and its occupation on October 6, 1939. After being huddled with hundreds of other prisoners in a train car for days, he now walked slowly towards the gate which read Arbeitsmarkt frei. Witold had known about the new German concentration camp and the rumors of what happened inside them. But while he witnessed people being shot near him, he knew that this camp would be different. He was correct. The camp, named Auschwitz, would become one of the most infamous concentration camps known for its horror. At his time in Auschwitz, one goal motivated Pilecki to move forward: to not only survive, but to find the kidnapped members of the Home Army, gather intelligence, and raise prison morale. Pilecki entered an inhumane world where he was forced onto less than 1,800 calories a day, in addition to long hours of labor. Trying to create an underground resistance, Pilecki didn't wait to recruit any members. He began walking throughout the prisoner promenade, a large pathway which was a popular place. Starting small, he was able to amass a small group from 100 to more than 1,000 members. Everyone within the group agreed to share their rations and do things for the greater good. All members had no idea who was also a part of the resistance.
But it was all secret. This is the one thing you've got to remember. Nobody knew who was in the resistance. And this was also, if you looked in Poland during the occupation period, for example, my grandfather and my great-grandmother were both in the resistance, living in the same house, and neither knew they were in the resistance.
Witold then began to send reports to the outside world. His first report was sent by Alexander Wipolski, one of the few prisoners whose family could afford bribes to get their loved ones out. Rather than risk getting caught with physical papers, Pilecki had Wipolski memorize the report. In his reports, there was information regarding the conditions of the camps, the number of prisoners that were being registered, and the expansion of two subcamps, Rjesko-Birkenau and Buna-Monowitz. The report that Alexander Wipolski memorized contained a short yet urgent message: bomb Auschwitz, even if it meant killing everyone in the camp. It reached the underground, then was passed on to the Allies in London. Publishers who learned of the report called it false with inflated numbers. Witold only heard silence from the outside world. His message had been ignored. But Pilecki didn't give up. When a group of 3 prisoners wanted to escape using a stolen car, he arranged for another person to memorize the report and escape with them. Dressed in officer uniforms, the prisoners Eugeniusz Bandera, Stanislaw Jaster, Josef Lempart, and Kazimierz Pichowski drove out of Auschwitz through the front gate, saluting Hans Armier, the camp commandant at the time. Rumors of an uprising began to circulate around the camp. Each prisoner knew it was better to die fighting. One afternoon at 4:30 p.m., the roll call whistle blew early. With rising tensions, hundreds of prisoners began to riot. Prisoners, afraid for their lives, died fighting with German guards, ripping off their striped clothing, and others jumped into nearby rivers. Blood began painting the walls of buildings and fences as each fighting prisoner lost their lives one by one. At the next roll call, Hans Armier took slow steps, circling the prisoners. He demanded the leaders of the uprising to show themselves. He murdered 17 prisoners. More than 200 prisoners were shot that day in an attempt to find the rebellious leader. One at a time, in a line, he shot each prisoner, only pausing to reload. And it continued like this for days to come. Despite the terror that flowed through each of the prisoners, they forced themselves to hold their heads high. As Pilecki watched members of the resistance get called each day, true fear rippled through him. He had had enough. He couldn't stand watching people die for an unsung cause. For every report Witold had sent, he couldn't stand the silence that returned. Every prisoner's life depended on it. In 1943, after 2 years inside Auschwitz, Witold, together with Jan Rzej and Edward Chichowski, forged a plan to escape the camp. One night, when they were all working inside a bakery that was stationed outside the camp's perimeter, they were able to overpower the guards and cut communication to the main camp. The camp's alarm sounded, and it started to rain. Witold and 2 other prisoners sprinted over 200 meters north while dodging dozens of bullets being fired at them. Shouts in German spread across the camp. 3 prisoners had escaped. At last they were safe. As Pilecki and the other prisoners began to relax, they were spotted by a Nazi soldier. For just a moment, they stared at the soldier. The soldier stared back. In a scramble, Pilecki fled with the prisoners. His arm had been shot, but the bullet had fortunately missed the bone, just grazing the skin. Witold Pilecki was shocked to have returned to a world of color and not one of life or death. He presented a report to the head of the underground operational wing, Karol Jabłoński. He showed Witold the files he had on Auschwitz and assured him that everything was under control. Karol said that there would be no attack on Auschwitz. Witold then visited Tomasz Serafiński, who helped and reported to the local underground branches. Many of the members of the branch had been arrested, and those who remained called Witold a spy, refusing to help. Witold then received a letter from a former prisoner he had helped escape, who went by the name of Stefan Pilecki. Opening the letter, Witold threw it on the floor with disgust. Inside was a ribbon from the underground in Warsaw, congratulating him for his work. But Witold did not want a reward. He wanted action. For the next few years, Pilecki joined anti-communist groups. He participated in the Warsaw Uprising of 1944 and once again was arrested. Within this prison, he guided prisoners as he did in Auschwitz until he was released. He fought as an unsung hero for the liberation of Auschwitz until the end of World War II in 1945. Reuniting with his wife and kids, he had no idea that he was in his last few years of life. Communist authorities tracked Pilecki, arrested him, and placed him in Mokotów prison. He had a trial where the odds were unfairly stacked against him. He wished that someone who knew the war he fought would speak up. In 1948, he was executed with a shot to the head. The truth of Auschwitz had been silenced by gunshot. Witold died thinking that he had failed to reveal the truth of those inside the gates of Auschwitz. But he had done something that no one else had, and that was to take a stand in a dangerous mission and help hundreds of prisoners thrive in a world that despised them.